So, Martin, let's talk about something close to your heart, driving. I know there's nothing more that you enjoy on the weekends than, putting on your driving gloves, taking the Jag out and, I don't know, going wherever you go in the countryside to a fox hunt or like a competition where you grow massive vegetables, something like that.
Well, my favourite thing to do in the car, James, is pick up those big gas canisters for the barbecue that we have outside and drive home from B&Q at 60 miles an hour with one hand on the steering wheel and one hand holding a giant container of gas on the passenger seat, just hoping I don't crash into anything and explode.
If this is how your life ends, Martin, this podcast is going to seem very strange to play back. But I guess as much as you love driving, there must be some things that annoy you about it, right? So I suppose you don't have to travel with the Great Unwashed on a socialist train, but driving's annoying too. I hate driving.
Yeah, I mean, particularly other drivers, people doing 40 miles an hour in a 60, people driving automatic cars who, for some reason, don't seem to be able to accelerate properly out of roundabouts, and people that just sort of dither along talking on their mobile. I mean, really, just other people, James. Other people really annoy me, and if they would just get off the road, it would just be a much better time for everyone, but specifically for me.
I have got a grand theory that driving makes us worse people because it tries to convince us all that we're all like the main character in our lives because you're in control of the vehicle, which just makes everyone else more annoying because they're like NPCs. Whereas something like a public transport, like a train, we're all in it together. We're all suffering together, or we're all sharing this journey. But anyway, Martin, the reason I wanted to talk about driving is because this week I want to tell you about something I think is genuinely amazing that the Department for Transport is doing. And weirdly, they're not really shouting about it. They're not telling anyone. And I think this could solve, well, I was going to say all problems with driving, everything annoying about driving, but maybe not all of the problems that you've just described. But I think it could definitely make driving significantly less annoying.
Okay, so I'm curious, is this going to be mandatory retesting every 5 years, James? Because I think that would be a grand idea.
Maybe that's more of a second term commitment for the government, Martin. So let's start this off. So let's go back in time. Have you heard of a thing called a Traffic Regulation Order, a TRO?
Not hugely, but I can sort of guess what it is from context clues, but go on.
Okay, so every road in the country, it's all managed by different bits of government. So National Highways, which used to be called the Highways Agency, which had the best logo in all of government because it was like an H and an A, where the H was like a motorway bridge and the A was like a road going under it. Brilliant. But they've rebranded. They've rebranded as exactly But they've rebranded as National Highways. But they do all the strategic roads, things like motorways and the bigger A roads and stuff like that. And then you've got your local councils. They look after the smaller roads, and then there's a few sort of weirder exceptions, like most of the major roads in London, they're looked after by Transport for London, who make sure buses can run down them and so on. Anyway, these authorities, they all look after the roads, and when they want to change something, like they want to adjust a speed limit or create a bus lane or dig up the road to do some roadworks, they have to issue a traffic regulation order, a TRO, and this is the legal document that explains what they're going to do.
Yeah, so this is the kind of thing that used to be published in the local paper back when there were local papers. I guess they probably just send them to Ed Jennings now or something, but they're floating around somewhere, right?
Yeah, they're legally obliged to publish them in the local press so people can theoretically find out what's going on. In effect, it's a massive de facto subsidy to the really awful local news outlets, the legacy ones run by Reach POC, and it's just a way of subsidizing them. But that's a whole other story. I'll put a link to a big post I wrote moaning about that in the show notes. But anyway, TROs. So you look at them, if you actually look at the documents, they're basically incomprehensible. It's all legalese and sort of hard to decipher descriptions of what's actually going on. Often they don't include things like diagrams, which would be quite useful. So even working out what bit of the road they apply to can be actually quite difficult.
And you would assume that these things would be published online at this point as well?
Yeah, most of them are. So I think if you go to your local council website, it's not a legal obligation, and maybe some of them don't, but I think most of them now do publish their TROs on the internet. TfL publish just a big list on their website buried somewhere. Kent County Council, my local council, they actually have an interactive map that you can click on to see what's going on, but it's shite because you can click on the pin, so you can see roughly the area where the TRO applies to, but then it doesn't actually say, oh, and we're digging up the road here, or there's a bus lane here. It just links you to a PDF of the same sort of incomprehensible traffic order. So it's like very grudging sort of transparency on the local council's part. And actually, the mad thing about Kent County Council is you click on these things and you realize what you're reading isn't just a PDF, but it's someone has like produced this on another computer. They printed it out, handed it to someone else, and then someone else has scanned it back in to upload it to the TRO system online or something like that. So it's absolutely baffling.
So that's great, but how is this going to improve driving?
So here's the thing, right? So TROs, they're not just legal notices. They actually contain some really useful information. So just to walk back a second. So one problem I have with Google Maps is that a lot of the time it just doesn't know about stuff. So the number of times I've been driving along and it didn't realize there were roadworks taking place. Even on major roads, I've been caught out on motorways by like unexpected overnight works. And I say unexpected by me. Like you think someone knows about this. So you just turn up to the one junction where you need to turn off and it's all coned off and you're sent on a mystery tour. Once I was driving back from Glasgow, 8 hours into the journey, we got to the last motorway junction to get home and it was all closed. So there was another sort of 50 miles on the journey. I could have cried, but I was behind the wheel of a car. So I had to keep my shit together. And it happens all the time. So another time, again, I'm an anxious driver. So I'll be looking at Google Maps as I'm driving along and it will suddenly say, oh, the speed limit here is different to what the last sign I remember seeing was. And I suddenly become panicky. I'm like, oh shit, am I breaking the speed limit or am I going too slow or have I missed something? And I feel like I'm going crazy. It's because it's all inconsistent. So all this stuff on Google Maps is generally crowdsourced from different places. It's all wildly inconsistent. And there's loads of other missing things as well. Like, again, when I'm planning a trip somewhere, if I'm planning to park on the street, I will literally go on Google Maps before I leave the house and go onto Street View and then find myself paging through, virtually walking along the street I'm going to go to try and see if I can see a traffic sign saying what the parking restrictions are in case it's like residence parking only. It's all just a big old mess.
Yeah, and then you find that the parking sign's been blurred out by the thing that automatically blurs out text, which is really not helpful. But yeah, I mean, this data is incredibly hit and miss, right? So in theory, a lot of this stuff is available. In theory, Google Maps knows about roadworks. But you have Parkopedia and so on for car parking. But yeah, it's like people who say, oh, can't cars be automatically limited to whatever the speed limit is in the area that you're driving to? Most of the time, the car doesn't know what the speed limit is. It's either try to read a speed limit sign with a camera on the front of it, which might work or might not work, or it's trying to infer it from data from places like Google. And 9 times out of 10, there's at least 2 different versions of what the speed limit should be. It's very hit and miss, right?
Yeah, and this is what's infuriating in that TROs, they exist. They're out there in the world. They're theoretically being published. They contain ground truth about important things, about every little thing, about how the road works, about which lanes you can drive on, about where you can park, about how fast you can go. All of these little things. When there's a school street or something like that, when you have to go slower at certain times of day. But all of the mapping services we use tend to be crowdsourced or inconsistent. So there is a really interesting data question of, can we get this data from TROs and make it useful? Can we make it available to Google Maps and mapping services and other apps and other applications so we can actually build more reliable mapping systems and so on?
Yeah, so it seems like a massively good idea, not just for driving around, but also, I guess, like navigation for lorry drivers or if we have autonomous vehicles in the future. So I'm completely sold. How do we make it happen, James? Is this going to be another one of your postcode address file campaigns?
It is a bit like that, Martin. Actually, lorries is a really interesting one as well. There's a route near me which has been closed off to lorries, but lorries keep driving up there. And if you could have lorry drivers that have a sat nav which says specifically where you can and can't drive, and it's all legally absolutely bulletproof, that would be so much more useful. But yeah, so this brings me back to what the Department for Transport are doing. So since 2018, there's been a team of poor, beleaguered civil servants there trying to work on what they're calling digital traffic regulation orders, digital TROs. And they've basically been trying to build out a system and wrangle all of the TROs into one big national database so we can have this big data set. And I really do think these civil servants, they're the unsung heroes here, because it's not a difficult bit of engineering to build a database. That's quite easy, right? But the actual getting everyone to get their data into the same place and feed it to the same place, that is a really difficult human and bureaucratic problem. So they've had to design a specification for how you could store a TRO in a digital way, because a lot of these are literally just the person in the council office typing up a TRO in Microsoft Word and exporting it as a PDF. So you've got to work out how to do it in a sort of machine readable way so you can actually have it stored in a database. And then the even bigger difficulty is how you persuade all of these hundreds of councils and different highway authorities and so on, like National Highways and TfL, etc., to all feed their TROs as they're published into this new system.
Yeah, and I mean, you're talking about like 600-700 councils, right? So this could be a bit of a nightmare. I guess that's why they've been working on it since 2018.
Yeah, it's quite funny. If you go into the depths of YouTube, you can actually find some videos about digital traffic orders and the sort of consultations with local council. I think they're basically like Zoom recordings, and you can hear, let's say, some slightly tetchy conversations between the DFT and the local councils, who are furious that they've got to do some more work. But it is getting there, and the reason I want to talk about it is because we're at the precipice of this all starting to take off now, and getting them into one place, it can be relatively straightforward. There are some common software packages. So most local councils, there's basically like case management software. It's a bit like how most GPs, though there are thousands of doctors around the country, they all use basically one of three software packages. So if you want to integrate something with like the NHS app, it's relatively easy to just persuade the software vendor to add a thing in to make it all talk to each other. So in the same way, I think they can get like 80% of TROs all sent up to this new DFT system just by changing one bit of software. And then it's just the sort of 20% that remain who in some cases still do stuff manually. But it is still a change. It's still a change in how you train people and how you update software. So there's still quite a lot of bureaucratic fiction there.
And so we're 7 years into this process at this point. Is the end in sight?
I'm not sure if the end is in sight, but certainly the start is well in sight now. So at the end of September, they launched a public beta of this new system. So the first local authorities are now on board and are feeding their data in, their TROs into the system. And I think it's by the first half of next year, they want to have everyone feeding in their new TROs, the newly created ones. And then the Transport Secretary as well, she's actually got the power to force councils to do this following the Autonomous Vehicles Act that passed last year within days of the election being called. Basically, she's now got the statutory instrument to press the button and say, no, now you've got to definitely do this. So fingers crossed, by this time next year, the database should be filling up, and I imagine it's going to be quite satisfying, like watching a big bucket of water fill up or something like that.
Yeah, and then driving will be completely perfect and painless, apart from obviously all the slow and annoying people on the roads.
Maybe it will be, Martin, and I hope it will be. I think it will be definitely more painless, especially when this database starts getting integrated with things like Google Maps and other tools and so on. But it is still going to all take a while to happen because there's not actually a concrete plan yet for how to feed in the archives of existing TROs into the system. And this could be a big deal because these things have been around for decades, right? And there could still be TROs which have been activated, as it were, for decades and decades ago and just have like never been digitized, because if a speed limit was set as like a 60-mile-an-hour road in the 1980s or something and nothing's changed since then there's no reason to like publish a TRO or have a digital thing on a digital system. So it'll take time, but like I say, over time this database is going to become more and more useful as a source of ground truth. It's slowly going to fill up with more and more accurate information, and as we see this built into different mapping apps and used by stuff, it will just make everything work that little bit better. And I do think it's really interesting because it could go much further than just making Google Maps slightly less annoying as well. So you could have things like what they call dynamic TROs, because if everyone's using a digital system, then you could have sort of timed or temporary TROs. So you could have a system where if it gets really busy, then double yellow lines are imposed or unimposed, or parking restrictions are changed to help traffic move a lot faster. You could have curbside pickup areas, which are sort of responding to demand as well, or timed or something like that. So you could say, well, deliveries can drop off here at certain times of day, but not during certain other times, stuff like that.
I mean, the obvious example, James, would be bus lanes, that are in operation certain hours of day, or certain routes that would be reserved for public transport, say during the rush hour in the morning and evening.
Absolutely. And you can even make them dynamic as well. So you can only make the bus lanes come on if traffic gets really bad, but you still want to get buses going through. And the other example I think is interesting as well is like loading bays on high streets. So if you live on a busy street, I used to live on Walworth Road in South London, this busy high street, and there's like loading bays in front of my house. And if you're a van driver trying to get stuff into a shop, you need that bay to be free. So we could build systems where you can book delivery bays by the hour or something like that. And then, of course, there's the self-driving stuff. You mentioned it a moment ago. So self-driving cars, if we want them to navigate autonomously, it's all well and good them relying on their cameras and LiDAR sensors, but if the more data they can have on board about what to expect and stuff, then that's going to make them more reliable, because they'll be able to see what's basically over the next horizon rather than just what's in front of them. So this could all feed into that and help make self-driving cars even safer as well.
Yeah, it sort of feels like one of those topics again, like the postcode address file, which I'm legally contracted to mention. But one of those cases where just joining up and data and making it available unlocks things that we probably haven't even thought of at this point, right? It's just an intrinsically, economically productive, innovative thing to do.
Absolutely. The analogy with all of these things, I always talk about it with the postcode address file as well, is that GPS was a system that was built by the American government for military stuff. They opened it up in 2000, and the amount of value it has created in terms of the new things that we can do, the new capabilities, is just immeasurable, because that's how we can, track our dinner being delivered to us. So in the same way, if we have all of this data, all of these TROs in one place, and this real detailed map, I guess, of how Britain's roads work from a legal perspective, in terms of all of the fiddly little bits of British road infrastructure all in one place, then who knows what people could build with that and what new clever things might emerge. And what I love about digital TROs is that it's sort of just a nice little value add, a little incremental thing that we're not going to see on an individual level. I'm sure driving will be ever so slightly less annoying, but we probably won't notice it on an individual level. It will just be the seconds saved that you didn't realize that you saved. But you aggregate this over the entire economy, it means everyone's going to be getting to where they want to be faster. It means greater productivity. It means just more economic activity can happen. It means we can use our road system more efficiently. And it means just basically fewer fuck ups and fewer things going wrong. So, yeah, I'm very excited that this is actually happening. This seems like such an obvious thing. And it's something that only really the government could do, because they need to be the ones to pull the levers to make all these people talk to each other and coordinate and get them in the same place. So, yeah, it's an exciting time. So we're just at the start of it now. So, yeah, maybe let's check in a few years' time and see just how slightly less annoying driving is, and maybe it'll help with growth as well.